Welcome, everyone. I'm Karen Hording, Executive Director and CEO for the Society of Women Engineers, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our second of two sessions on demystifying the nominating committee. Our presenters for this evening are Stacy Del Vecchio, who is the chair of the nominating committee, and Heather Bernardin, who is the chair-elect for the committee. We do have
No, go ahead. Sorry.
we do
We're
have
waving.
Oh, she's waving. Okay. We do have everyone on mute, but please do type questions into the chat. Brittany Elko from the nominating committee is on, and she will be answering some of those right in the chat, and then others we will be taking after the formal presentation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Stacy.
All right, thank you, Karen. We will share our slide here. So you can already see us on the, Heather and I were waving our hands, but I'm Stacy Del Vecchio, and Heather, the chair of the committee, and Heather Bernardin is the chair-elect. And I will tell you, we are super excited to do this session. Karen had mentioned that this was one of two sessions, and the one that was this morning, the content is the same, other than some of the questions may be different, but they are both being recorded, and you'll be able to access those later if those of you who are watching live want to see it again, I guess. Also, we are talking about what the nominating committee does, and not all leaders are vetted by the nominating committee. We've got a slide on that that Heather will be going through. And one of our other SWE leaders will be back with you after the first of the year to talk about some of the other leadership vetting and how we do that. So this is, you'll see just the part that we do. Okay, so for an agenda, we really just have, kind of what we said in the announcement. We're going to talk about some of the processes and timeline, what makes a good application, how we do the evaluation, that, everybody thinks that's some super secret part, but it isn't. And we want to save at least half of this meeting for your questions. So we had some in advance and some that we've pulled from our FAQs on our website. And of course, we expect that we will be getting some in the chat feature as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heather to go through this first part.
Okay, so the first thing is, what does the nominating committee look like? With the governance changes, the nominating committee has changed. It used to be that there was a person from each region. Now it's still 10 voting members. It doesn't have to be 10. We can actually do more. This year we looked at whether or not we needed to after the work we did last year. At this point, we're still keeping it around there. The members do not have to come from different parts of the regions. We actually look at a lot of diversity when we're looking for our committee. And actually, the nominating committee does vet the incoming members and then sends the recommendations to the board of directors for approval. So some of the things we try to get is past president, past member of the board of trustees, somebody with global experience, somebody from academia. We've got some working moms, we've got some small business, we have an AG member this year, which is great.
Senate.
Yes, Senate. We like to have somebody who is on the Senate as well.
What's an AG member, Heather?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the affinity groups. The affinity groups are one of, they're not exactly a committee, and adding them in this year, Bralade actually came in as a member with us to sort of give us that extra perspective to help with our diversity, making sure that we were looking at diversity properly. There's also 3 non-voting members. The society elects the nominating committee chair-elect. So the chair and the chair-elect are nominated. So Stacy is the current chair. I'm the chair-elect. And then Karen Hording, the SWE executive director, also sits on the nominating committee. And the 3 of us are non-voting members. So we will facilitate the meetings. We'll later on, some of the things that we do, you'll see that we take care of that, like doing the interviews, working with headquarters to get all the requests out, all good stuff like that. All right, so this is an overview of what we do. The timing changes from year to year, and it may seem like we give a lot of time for some of the things, but we'll talk about why as well. So so the first thing we do is the call for nominations, which is where we are. And when we pick the date for that, it's actually, we're backing up because the slate must be announced on by a specific date per the bylaws. And the bylaws were not online, so I couldn't get the exact date. I think, Stacy, you have that? It's in February.
Yeah, it's February 1 that has to be
Okay.
out. The members have to be notified.
Yes, so all the work we do to create the slate and send it to headquarters to announce has to be done prior to that February 1 date. So all of our other dates prior to that are based on that. So right now we're in our call for nominations. It might seem really early, the year has just started, but there's a lot that goes into this. So there's about a month for the deadline. So gives you about a month to think about if you want to put in, or think about people you know that might be good to put in, and encourage them to apply. Once that deadline happens, we'll take the people that nominated and we'll make sure that they're actually eligible. And by eligible, that is they meet the minimum requirements per the bylaws. We won't just say, oops, I'm sorry, you're not, we won't just like kick you off right away. If, it won't be one person saying, nope, you're not even being considered. We just check the eligibility. And at that point, everybody who's eligible, we will put them in the call for feedback. So both to the membership, and you could forward those. Stacy will talk a little bit more about the call for feedback and the references. And at that time, we start the interviews. And the interviews, we sort of break up. Previously it was done at conference, then there was like a couple years ago, it was all done in 1 week online. We'll go into detail about what's involved in the interviews, but we've kind of spread them out a little bit. We do the president-elect first, anyone who put in for that position, because that is the first item that we vet. And then we go to the board of directors. So those ones will be on the front end. So expect if that's what you're putting in for, you're going to need to be interviewed early. And everybody else's interviews fall after that in the second group of people. So then what happens? Why does it take us 3 months to vet people? And that's because you'll see when Stacy gives you the info, there's a lot of information that the committee is looking at. So for it's roughly 22, 23 positions, we are looking at what's best for the society for those positions. And in the last couple of years, we've gotten close to 50 people. So we're vetting 50 people over the course of those 3 months. And that involves looking at all the information that Stacy's going to go through. I would say, I know personally when I was on the committee, for each person that applied, it probably took me 1 hour to 2 hours per person to go through all their documentation and listen to their interviews. And that was before we got into a room with everybody to discuss. And the way that vetting process works is first, we'll look at president-elect per the election manual. That's an uncontested position always. We will, that's the highest position. So we will slate that person first, and then we'll move on to the board of directors. And then from there, and we will move on to the other positions. Last year, we took the approach of president-elect and board of directors were done as a whole group. Everybody was involved in that discussion. Then when we got to the other positions, we split into 2 groups. So one group took the board of trustees and the committee chairs, and the other took the Senate and Senate leadership. And then we came back together and finalized. Sometimes there was a little negotiation, like somebody had put in for 2 positions and both groups thought, oh, that person would be good. So there was a little back and forth. At that point, we get the final slate that we're putting out that that the committee agrees on. At that point, you'll be notified. It's important one way or the other, whether you're being slated or not. We're not 100% sure what that'll look like this year if you're not slated. In the 2 years ago, or prior to last year, there was written feedback that we gave. So you would get a call and be handed your, read the intro paragraph from that and then given your written feedback. We moved away from the written feedback last year. So the I'm sorry you didn't get it slated calls we found didn't work very well. So the committee is in the process of trying to figure out how to improve that that part of the process to make it a little smoother, a little less awkward, and to and then additionally, the people who are slated will get a call and they will need to accept the position at the time of that call. At that point, the only people who know who were slated are the people that we called and the nominating committee and headquarters, because headquarters is preparing the slate announcement. We do not give that information to the board of directors ahead of time or the board of trustees or any of the other committees. So until it goes out with the email from the headquarters to everybody at once, nobody but the committee knows. And I did want to mention during the vetting process, everything we discuss is confidential. So all the information we get in is confidential. So it does make it tough because as you'll find later, sometimes we can't always talk about why we made a decision that we did because of that confidentiality. So after the slate's announced, there is a petition period, a voting period, and then the results are announced. Last year, we were challenged to do this a little bit faster than the February 1st deadline, and we were able to do that by meeting all day at the conference on the Wednesday of the conference. We won't be able to do that this year, so we're not sure we'll be able to pull in the dates like we did last year. Okay, so what do? We vet nominees for the positions that you end up seeing on your ballot: board of directors, board of trustees, Senate leadership, senates, and the standing committee chairs. We gather all kinds of feedback on those nominees, whether it's member feedback, feedback from references. You can actually, with the member feedback, you can forward that on to your coworkers, your boss, people in your other other service areas that where you volunteer. We then discuss those members. We prepare a slate, and then actually after we do all that work, we update our forms and our processes. The committee is constantly reevaluating like what worked and what didn't work and how are we handling the load, particularly with the new governance. So like I said, one of the calls last year didn't work. We realized that right away. So we're working with some people who are on the receiving end of those calls to figure out like what's the best way to fix what isn't working. And then the last thing we do is vet the nominating committee members for the following year and send the recommendations to the board of directors. So what we don't do is we don't vet any of the other positions in the society. So none of the special directors, none of the other committees, nothing like that. We don't decide how electable a candidate is. And we don't choose the society leaders, and we'll cover that a little bit more when we get into the Q&A part. We also are not solely responsible for the pipeline, and we don't mentor or help individual nominees or tell them what their career path is. It's not part of what we do. All right, and so
All
Stacy.
right. So Heather has alluded to some of these things, but just to go into them in a little more detail, what you're seeing on the screen here is what is in your nomination package, and that's the email that came out on Saturday. The 2-minute video that's up there is something that's new. We do think that this question is important about, what do you bring to the position, and how are you going to help move SWE's mission forward? We talk about the SWE's mission a lot and what's best for the society, so we thought, let's hear it from you. And by doing the 2-minute video in advance, it gives you time to think about it and make it thoughtful, but it's got to be pretty short because we're only going to listen to 2 minutes. The other part of these 4 pieces of what we're calling documentation that you will be combining into one PDF. And this part, the documentation piece, is pretty similar to past years, although some of the, sometimes we change word count or some of the questions are different. So we want to know about your goals and vision for the position that you're putting in for. Make it persuasive. Tell us why you want to do it. Don't just say that, well, you need to be a SWE leader for 2 years and I need that, period. What you want to do is say what you, the passion you have or what you think you're going to do with it. So be sure to look at that. And then also the SWE competencies, because that is something that we've worked a lot with as a society to make sure that we have competencies for what we need for our leaders. And we want examples of those leadership competencies. So you're not going to just say, yeah, I've got business acumen, period, or, I manage whatever. Give us something there. And then we've got the 2 resumes. So professional resume is pretty straightforward. And we have the SWE/service resume. And I want to make sure that you notice that it says SWE/service. So if you have held positions in other volunteer organizations, we want to hear about that. It has been, so with the governance changes, we did change our requirements such that other equivalent leadership and responsibilities would be considered for these leadership positions. And I think with all the changes that were going on, people forgot that, or maybe they lost that detail, because we still get questions saying, why can't you count up, something work that people did in another, if they were in SWE or SHIP or something at work? Well, you can. You need to tell us about it. So we've split it up into those 2 resumes, the professional resume and then the SWE/service, which would have service meaning any of your volunteer pieces. And then we get the references. So this comes from you, and we're looking for 2 to 3 references. Actually, I think we've got it changed so that it's 3 references mandatory, but you'll see that in the application. And these references don't have to be from SWE. What we're looking for is somebody that can speak to what you do, how you work, the quality of work you do, how you accomplish things. So if you feel that the person that you work with at work knows that best, or from another organization, that's fine. Or you know what, maybe your SWE boss is the best person, but you get 3 of them, and we want to hear from it. So we'll ask for that information. We've asked for references a couple years now, but last year was the first year where we actually did reach out to them and ask for their feedback. So that was a good change if we're going to ask for that information. So what makes a good application? And we see all kinds because we have a lot of information we're reviewing. The first bullet is what we want to know is how your experiences and results align with what's being requested in the call for nomination. That little snapshot I have there is not meant to be your official document. That is just a snapshot from the email that went out. So reference the email with the call for nominations, and each position that would be in that call has a similar sort of high-level bullets. And there's all kinds of information on these positions, but make sure that you address it. So when you're talking about it, we do have word counts on things. So let's say you run out of word count. Well, you can put some of this in your resume, and you can put it in your goal statement, and you can say, oh, I need to remember to highlight this when I have my interview. But think about what we've got listed there for the requirements, and make sure that those are the things that you bring up and talk about. And talk about specifics, talk about what you did, what your accomplishments. Make sure that your references provide feedback. So Heather will actually be the one sending an email to the references. Heather may not know that, so she's learning it now. But Heather will be sending it, not headquarters, because it's a much smaller list of people. And what we need is for your references to respond to that, fill it out, and provide meaningful feedback. Once again, we're looking for examples of how you work, how you did, what we want to hear about as far as how you work and how you work with people and what accomplishes you did. And if they don't reply, that's your voice. Those are your hand-picked people that you asked, and you really want them to reply. With all these documents that you're sending in, make sure you proofread them. And I know that seems pretty, pretty basic, but we put it up there because sometimes that doesn't happen. We did have an earlier question about if how do we make sure that we're not biased with English as a second language, and it's actually a really good question because we want to make sure that we're not punishing somebody for having English as a second language. But in the case of written documents, great reason for, you know, send it to some people and look at it and have them review it. That's always good. And be clear in your content. Once again, some of these things we've got word restrictions, so you're going to need to be concise and clear. And you know what? It's okay if you don't take up all the words. If the resume is supposed to be 2 to 3 pages, it's okay if it's 1.5, as long as you get the information in there. And sometimes being concise is what it's all about. So as we have grown as a society, it is not uncommon for those of us on the committee not to know the people that are being nominated. So don't assume we know about it. Don't assume that before you were strategic planning chair that you were the CPC chair, because people aren't going to know that if you don't tell people that. So put it in your application in some form, because it's a, you know, we're getting bigger. And actually, this is probably a good practice for all of us, because what we could run into the habit of doing before was just like, oh, I know Heather, she'll be great, even though her resume didn't say anything. And we've grown beyond that. We can't do that. We can't rely on that. And I see it as a good thing, because it's not just the who you know sort of thing, which is a good way to not look at all the people that are in your pipeline. So put it in there, because we won't know it if it's not in there. So the interview, and Heather started, you know, with some of the evolution of the interview. This year it's going to be 30 minutes. It's virtual. When you do your application, there's 2 different links based on your the position that you're putting in for. Those board positions have the first link, and you are going to choose 3 preferred times. And then we will work to choose one of those 3 times and send you headquarters will send you a calendar invite. So virtual interview, the people in that interview are obviously the nominee, and then Heather and I will be there as the chair and chair-elect, and the interviews are recorded. So the committee members have the opportunity to listen in on the interview. They won't be live, they won't be able to talk, you won't see, so you won't have like 10 people staring at you on this virtual interview. But a lot of them, it seems like, have chosen just to watch the recording later, because obviously we use that with our vetting, so that's why it has to be recorded. But tips, some of this is so basic, but please take it to heart, because we see people that have not done this. But be prepared. Know what the position is that you're putting in for. The interview is not the time to say, so tell me, what does Senate Secretary do? You should be doing that in advance. It is an interview. If you would not do that when you're going to a job interview for an engineering position, don't do it here. You know, so that's the whole be prepared. Think about it. Think about what you want to go through and think about. Here's some 10 good things that I really want to make sure the nominating committee knows. Think of that in advance, so that when we're in the interview, you have all these examples ready. And just don't be going, I never thought of how I've displayed diversity. You want to have that ready, because that's what we want to hear. And once again, we do really appreciate concise. What we learned over the past couple of years is that the length of the interview is no indication of the quality of the answers and the people. So think about quality answers and not just continuing to just fill the time. We want to know why you're unique, what you bring to the role, and then just a minor thing is check your technology in advance. And we all know that certainly things go wrong. You know, there's hurricanes going through right now and stuff like that happens, but it shouldn't be something like, oh, I need to download this app in order to get it going, and you haven't done that. So make sure that sort of stuff, that you're prepared, you're ready to go, and that will put you a step ahead. Now, Heather also alluded to some of this evaluation process, and I had alluded to it when I talked about the agenda, that people feel this is the super secret part. And it's really, if you've ever gone through any sort of been a hiring manager at work or on an interview panel as an interviewer, it's a similar sort of thing. What's different is that we are vetting over 20 positions for all these nominees. And so that does bring in a level of complexity that I've never had in my 30+ years in industry. But what we're looking at is that nomination package. So all of those things that the people send in. So everybody knows what, boom, that's what you're giving us. The feedback. So we'll have the references, and then we'll have the feedback from the members or colleagues. We put colleagues because Heather had mentioned that you can forward that link to other people. So, so don't forward your link to your references, because your references are going to get this special email from Heather, but you certainly can forward that feedback link to other people that you feel have something to contribute. We'll also have the interview. And then the other thing that we have is what is best for SWE this year. So we have the information that's in that call for nominations where it talks about the different things from each position. But then we also reach out to the current SWE leaders and say, what gaps do you have? What are you looking for? A couple years ago at the board and the Senate, we wanted to make sure we had more of a global presence. So we're like, okay, let's make sure that we're pulling on that global and really making note of the people that have global experience, and we ask some questions around that. This year, we certainly know that diversity is a big part of what we want to be placing, but we will be having those calls with our current SWE leaders and saying, okay, what kind of gaps do you have? Do you need experience? Do you need new people? Do you still have a global gap? I think it's safe to say that there's a diversity gap across the board, but specifically for different positions, what do we need? And so that is the super secret process, and I'm sure you can tell there's nothing super secret about that. The only complexity is the fact that we've got all of these positions that we're vetting, and 10 people put in for director, and if all of them don't get on the slate, are there other spots that might be good for them for the betterment of SWE? And we'll probably get to that in a question. So how can you contribute if you want to help? Share that call for nominations. Think about who would be good in your network and say, hey, Stacy, I think you'd be great as a senator. Why don't you look at this and consider nominating? It is a self-nomination process, but I'll tell you, most people respond to being encouraged to apply. So don't underestimate the value of tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, I was a senator a couple years ago. I think it's a great rewarding experience. You'd be good at it. That goes a long way, and people need that little push, and it can really help. So encourage them. Look at that. Look at who you think would be good. Or when you see, who our SWE leaders are, and you're like, man, I've got a lot of better leaders than that in my section. Well, maybe they don't know about that, and you need to tap them on the shoulder. When that call for feedback comes out to the members, provide meaningful feedback. We don't need to see things like, I've known Stacy for 10 years and she's committed to SWE. It really doesn't add anything. So think about all these data points that the nominating committee has, and we need things that are specific about the performance of people and how we're going to predict that they perform in the job. And just saying like they meet the requirements and they're dedicated to SWE is just, unfortunately, doesn't add anything. And then another thing is, if you really want to go to the next step, and you can apply to join the nominating committee, and that application is in March with the call for non-standing committee chairs. So it's a little bit buried in there sometimes, since that's part of our new process with not having the regions. But we do the call with the non-standing committee chairs so that we have more leeway in order to get that through the process and get people in and up to speed so we can be ready to roll July 1. All right. So this takes us to the fun part of our questions, and I can see this little box has been flashing already. So
yeah. So wait, make sure I'm not on mute. Okay. So yes, go ahead and put them in there, and anything that Erica or Brittany can answer, they will. And I've already got some to go in the queue. Okay. So first question is, what is SWE doing to gain more diversity on our slate, and is the nominating committee's role to seek out diverse candidates?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the second part of that first, as far as what the nominating committee is doing. So I had mentioned earlier that there's lots of steps to leadership selection, not just what the nominating committee vets. And the nominating committee is not responsible for the SWE pipeline and nurturing all of our leaders to get into those positions. Right now, I see this as a SWE leader responsibility. So what we're doing as a nominating committee is we're reaching out to the SWE leaders and saying, okay, here's what we need. We need diversity. You know, we're only 10 people, or 13 people if you count the non-voting people. We do not know everybody. There's just no way. And it would be wrong if we just went out and started tapping on these people that we knew that happened to be diversity candidates. We want to go out and reach out to those SWE leaders in order to say, hey, who do you know? Who do let's work through your networks. And by the time we work with the SWE leaders, because there's a lot of us, we start getting to more people. And because, we have qualified candidates out there with a whole wealth of diversity, and it's a matter of having somebody encourage them in order to apply. So what the nominating committee specifically is doing is reaching out to these SWE leaders. We're starting doing it with some of the posts that you may be seeing on the affinity group, Facebook groups, and then from there, we're going to reach out individually. Unfortunately, I know that this call here tonight conflicts with some of the SWE leader training, but we have ways to reach out to that group of people as well. So reach out to them, and then from a society, this is a society issue to help solve by reaching out to all these SWE leaders and say, hey, let's get these diverse candidates and have, encourage them to apply because we know that they're out there.
Okay, and the next question is, why are some positions uncontested?
Okay, so if you, so right now, the only one that needs to be uncontested is the president-elect. And we went through that because for president-elect, people put in for president-elect, it's a big personal commitment, and you have to put in early for it. Like here it is August, and this would be for a position that you would be starting in July 1. And, it's a family commitment, it's professional commitment, and in order to get through the nomination process is a length of time. And then if you put on top of that an election, and you might not find out you have the position until early May, and you've got orientation in June to start this pretty major commitment. So for president-elect, we're like, let's let them know as soon as they're on the slate that it's uncontested. And that seems to have gone okay. Where we frequently get this question is in the positions like Senate or some of the directors, where we have put out a slate that some of those are not contested. And I will tell you, the nominating committee does not take this lightly. What we end up with, let's talk senators. So senators, a couple years ago, we were looking to try to get more of a range of experience. So we didn't want everybody to be like super SWE people. We wanted some of these different experience levels, different experience levels in SWE, professionally, different industries, trying to pull in some diversity, ethnic and racial diversity. And when we looked at that, and we're like, okay, we've got these people, these are great. We didn't even know these people existed because once again, the nominating committee does not know every member in the society. And so this is great. And we needed 7. There's 7 positions. And what we go through is, let's say that we down select all these great candidates and we end up with 10. And we know that we have 7 positions. And so if we put out a slate with 10, we know that 3 people will not get on there. And the tough decision we have is if we have one person that, or 1, 2, or 3 people, let's say our only diversity candidate, there's 3 diversity candidates, and we put out a slate with 10 people, knowing that our 7 are elected, we run the risk that those 3 diversity candidates won't get elected. And is that the best thing for the society? So it's just, we make the tough call that in order to be sure that we fill these needs of the society, that we, if there's somebody that needs to be on that slate and needs to be in that position, the only way to make sure that they don't get, that they get in the position is to have it uncontested. And so it is, we talk about this a lot, and it is a challenge with the society, but we have to kind of weigh, okay, if this person doesn't get on and this person does, well, you know what, they're both pretty much bringing the same experiences, so that would be okay. And in that case, we would have a contested election. But sometimes if we have a couple of those people that are just really unique, and if it's a contested election, they may not get the position, and we feel the society needs that unique experience. which only emphasizes more the reason in your video and in your interview to tell us what unique perspective you bring to the position. And people struggle with that. And I'll tell you, if you struggle with telling us what unique perspective you bring to the position for the betterment of SWE, you need to do some soul searching, because if you can't think of what unique perspective you bring, it's hard for us to figure that out.
Right. Does the committee look at a bigger picture and consider future years, succession planning, grooming, the pipeline, and how is
Yeah.
that maintained from year to year?
So we are not doing the leadership pipeline. Like, we don't have a list of people that, here's people that we see going from senator to director, and then once they're director, like, okay, these people, we're going to ask them to put in for president-elect. We feel that that's too much of us, you know, kind of like the diversity question, where we're not going out and picking people that we know and telling them to apply. So no, and it goes to one of the comments on the slide Heather had about what we do and what we do not do, because we're not there to be the mentors and coaches for people. We do provide some feedback to people if they ask for it, but still it's not that we're laying out a whole career path for them.
Yeah, and one of the things that we discussed with the outcome of the Senate, and we've discussed with Heather, is that the pipeline, you know, they had a recommendation on how to look at the whole issue in general. The pipeline is something the society needs to figure out who owns that, and
Right.
yeah, how it'll be managed.
Right, but in lieu of that, don't just sit back and say, well, nominating committee didn't tell me. You know, work with your current SWE boss, or work with, you know, maybe this is a cop-out because people say, I hate it when they tell me to find a SWE mentor, but, you know, find a mentor, find somebody who kind of did what you want to do, and see if you can sit down and chat with them. Maybe it doesn't need to be a big mentor relationship. Maybe it just needs to be a chat at some point in time. So you still can own that, even though we don't have, you know, there's still more work to be done in that area.
Okay. The next question is, so we have a lot of, and we got this one in the morning too. We have a lot of applicants, and then we're encouraging people to apply for the positions, but there's only so many positions. What does the nomcom do to make sure that even if the member is rejected, they don't get slated, they still are valuable, feel valuable in SWE?
Right. So I said this in the morning session, and it is not our goal to make you feel demoralized or depressed going through the nominating process. And based on what I hear some people's experiences are, I think we're failing in that. But all the more reason that we do want your feedback, and we continue to evolve. So when Heather talked about the notification calls, that's based on direct feedback and, you know, some of our experiences. Like, I didn't really think it worked last year, and so we're like, okay, talking with some people that experienced it, it didn't work, so we're going to change it. But so part of it, it goes to our responsibility to make that a better process. I know the process is pretty involved, and so you're vested when you go through this, and then when you don't get slated, there's disappointment. I mean, there's no way around that. And it's kind of like, you know, if you put in for a job and then you don't get the job, you usually don't be like, yeah, Stacy's my best friend, even though she didn't choose me to have her job. So we know that there's some of that disappointment, but if you do ask for feedback and get it, we want you to make sure that you sit back and reflect on it versus just getting defensive. Because I think the people that end up, yeah, you know, sometimes we miss the mark, and that's only, we're all humans on here, and we, that just happens. But we do ask you to take some reflection and think about what we're telling you, and then also go back. If it's not in your application, we don't know about it because we don't know the people. So if you did some really fabulous work, strategic work, and we come back and we say, well, this is a strategic job and we didn't see that, and you're like, I can't believe they said that, that's all I've done. Well, if you didn't tell us, we don't know. So yeah, I think this will be, we will constantly be striving to make it a positive experience, but really that is our goal. And you know, you can catch any of us if you know us, or my emails at the email that goes to Heather and I is at the end of this presentation. You know, you can send us emails, and we really do consider that, because we don't want this to be we don't want it to be a bad experience for you.
All right, so next question is, there's a danger of hidden bias in favoring candidates who look like us and think like us. In what ways, what does the nominating committee do to fight this hidden bias?
Yeah, so this is a tough one. I will say we've had people, when we were talking about the diversity and inclusion question, saying, will the nominating committee go out and search for diversity candidates if we don't get them that apply? And I do not think that we should go out and tap people on the shoulder and say, hey, you need to apply, because then it's going to be really hard. Okay, so, you know, Brittany Elko is on our committee. Brittany goes and says, hey, I want this person to apply, and helps them apply or tells them to apply. And then Brittany's going to have a bias because she's had that person apply. So for us to work with the SWE leaders and to work through them is much stronger and helps us remove bias. It's, you know, we've got some really open and tough discussions, and if you've actually tapped on somebody's shoulder for them to apply, it's hard to remove the bias that you bring to that. So that's one piece. And I will tell you, we've evolved with that. As recently as a couple of years ago, we used to reach out and tap people on the shoulder, individuals that we knew. So this is a good thing. The other thing is that we are very open with each other about who we know and what those biases might be. So everybody in the nominating committee has been in SWE for a while, and we do have a big network. So if we know somebody, we tell everybody, I know this person, or we might say, I had a tough call with them last year, so I just want people to know that I've got that bias. Or it might be something like, okay, I can say this because I tend to have a problem interrupting people. So somebody might say, I have a real pet peeve about people that interrupt, and so I'm trying to like not bring that bias to the vetting because I know that the person is more than just that. So part of it, this is the conscious bias though, that we bring to the table, that we share it, and we make sure that we hold each other accountable. And this is a tough group of people. So I'll tell you, we will call each other on the table. We have some really refreshing, respectful, difficult conversations. And so if we think that somebody is exhibiting bias, we will share that. We talked about bringing global perspective. And so Erica Breckman's done a lot of work living outside the US, and she will frequently say, well, you know, someone might not have a good internet connection based on where they live, or, you know, pretty basic things sometimes. But I will also say that this is a journey, and that unconscious bias piece of it is something that is a little bit more difficult for us, other than holding each other accountable for what we're hearing. And, you know, the value of having 10 people, it does help.
So there's a follow-up question to that as to whether or not we scrub the names when we're evaluating or not. I mean, we do scrub when we get general feedback. Yeah. We do scrub so nobody knows who the with the exception of the references, nobody knows who that feedback is coming from. But then the second question is, do we scrub the names of the candidates?
Yeah, no, we do not. We've actually never talked about doing that, so we can put that on our list for if that's something that would be helpful to do.
It would be difficult though with the interviews when you see them and interview them.
That's
unless you got rid of an interview.
That's right. And I'll tell you, so a lot of these positions, yeah, so we could scrub the documents, but not the interview. The interview ends up being really key to us because a lot of these positions have communication as being a key piece of the requirements, and to see somebody and how they're responding and answering questions that aren't prepared is very important for a lot of positions. But yeah, so that would be almost be impossible.
Yeah.
Good point.
All right. What's the average amount of feedback that you would get for the various positions?
Yeah, and so we're taking this question to mean when we do the member/colleague feedback, like, do people get 200 people that submit things, or do they get 2? And I will say it's kind of all over the map. Some people have had 4 or 5 people that submit something for them. On the high side, I think it's maybe 40 or 50. Heather was thinking it was maybe a little bit higher on some of the president-elect candidates, but yeah, but a lot of the candidates
felt
that way. Yeah, as you're reading every line.
Yes.
Yeah, and but so we're not getting anybody that's getting hundreds, and it is sometimes just a case of 4 or 5. If someone gets no feedback, though, that is something that makes us pause, because we think surely there's one or two people that know this person, and we ask nominees to send out that link to other members and colleagues. So surely either they didn't do that, or just, I can't believe literally nobody knows them. And so it's kind of a red flag if you get 0 feedback, or if you get 3 people that give you feedback and they say what I was talking about earlier, that, you know, Stacy's been a SWE member for a long time and is committed to SWE. It kind of tells you there's something else going on there. So.
And how do you handle conflicting feedback if you get like
Yeah.
one piece of bad feedback and, you know, other good feedback?
Right. So if it's a lot of times people think, oh, you know, Heather's out to get Stacy because she didn't like, you know, I'm in committee with her or something. And if it's just one person, it's pretty easy to tell, because there may be several lines, it comes in a spreadsheet, several lines of good feedback, and then there's one kind of a flyer. We will read it. It's not that we read everything that's submitted, but if it's one, it's kind of telling us that it's a bit of a flyer. If it's multiple instances, what we have seen is that maybe one committee had a problem with this nominee. So you'll see multiple people talk about this one situation. But then if there's a lot of other complementary, you know, positive feedback, we're like, okay, we've all had bad days. We've all had times where we didn't respond to an email fast enough. At least I'm kind of assuming in the course of your SWE history that you probably have not responded to an email. And so we try to weigh that. And then the other thing is that member feedback's not the only thing. We have the resume, we have all that documentation you're sending us, we have the interview, we're going to have your little 2-minute video. So we have all this thing to balance with it. Now, if you've got negative feedback and then you kind of bomb the interview and your resume is just a list of positions with no accomplishments, then it kind of starts to tell a story. So, you know, we frequently hear that, oh, somebody didn't make the slate because this group of people, you know, ganged up and they sent in a bunch of bad feedback. We do have other pieces of data that we try to weigh against. And so if it's bad feedback and these other things are bad, it reinforces that maybe this isn't the best candidate, but you're not going to be able to really blackball a person just by, you know, ganging up with your friends and submitting bad feedback.
And we also look at when the person had the interaction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if the bad feedback was from 5, 6, 7 years ago, and that person has taken actions, or it could even have been like 2 years ago, and that person took their feedback and said, wow, I really like blew it. I totally see what they were saying, and they take actions and they improve themselves, and then the good feedback is newer, and it's like, ooh, this person, that really, like, that's considered as well.
Yeah, and we've also had people in the interview acknowledge that, you know, last year I had a lot of personal health problems and I wasn't able to do XYZ of my SWE relationships and I had to step down or something. People acknowledge some situation that was going on and they can do it in an interview. And then we start to see some negative comments that are tied to that position. It helps us understand the story.
Right. This was partially answered in the chat, but just to make sure everyone, to get your opinion on it, what is the committee doing to ensure that non-visible diversities are looked at the same level as visible diversities?
So one of the reasons you'll see, for those of you that will be applying, that we've got a lot more check boxes on like demographics and areas of diversity that's in the application that we haven't had before. So this will give us an opportunity to know what those non-visible diversity pieces are, because if they're non-visible, and I've already said we don't know everybody, then we wouldn't know about them. So we're giving people a way to share that so that we can consider it and make sure that it kind of balances out what we're looking for from different pieces of diversity, and, you know, making sure that not everybody's the same. And then if it's not shared there, once again, we've got this video that we're having people do about why are you unique. So it gives people another chance to say something there. And so to look at what that is and look what the slate's going to look like. The other thing that we do is we then go back and we look, in the case of the Senate and the board of directors, we look and we say, okay, who's returning on the board of directors? Because those are 2-year terms. And we look at what would be the compilation of diversity in the entire board, because you have the returning people and the people that we're slating, and then same thing with the Senate, because we've got people there for 3 years, so we've got 2/3 of the Senate returning, and we're adding in a third new. So what would that whole picture look like? Now, yeah, so we will have more information this year that people are sharing with us on that non-visible diversity, which will really help us out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, for the last 2 years, we've sort of tried to figure it out, like through LinkedIn profiles and through what they did, and we tried working that way. So, like, very exciting that people will be able to like indicate all of those different categories, and we'll know for certain. Okay, I've got one more that I was going to cover, and then Brittany or Erica, if I missed any, let me know. And it is, you speak a lot about doing what's best for the society this year, but I think it might be short-sighted to not consider if you'll have the best possible candidates available. If, for instance, your best PE candidate have all accepted to your director positions.
Yes. So with the case of, so we'll go back to, so let's specifically talk about the example, you know, if all of your best PE candidates accept to your director positions. So we had the question last year, and we've had it in the past, where somebody has broken a 2-year term in order to run for president-elect, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing, nothing that says that that's not allowed. Now, obviously, it's a little disruptive, but it certainly is. There's procedures on how we would handle if that happens, and so there's just there's no way that we can say, okay, we're gonna slate Heather this year for president-elect, and then we're gonna hold Brittany in the wings for president-elect, and you know, just have her do nothing for a year because we want her to be president-elect. We don't have, for that specific position, we don't have a way to do that. And yeah.
We did.
And so
yeah. So the one thing we did look at when we were slating board is because president-elect has to be on the board. There was some consideration of pipeline in terms of, will these people be people that have the ability to be president-elect? And do we have it? Yeah, when we're looking at directors, and do we have enough people that could potentially rise to that level?
Right, right. So there is some of that discussion, but we don't have a list of who's going to go into it next. Part of that, yeah, if you go back to, we're not doing career paths for people, we're not mentoring people necessarily, unless just through our own personal networks outside of the nominating committee. And so it makes it hard to have that list of people. And in the past, I know that people, we're talking years ago, where people would say things like, well, I was, you know, supposed to be earmarked for, you know, to replace, you know, Stacy as secretary when we did that. And it's like, well, we've never had it that way, where we've got like your heir apparent lined up that would replace the person. And so
and I think that ends up giving you that you know, old boys club.
Yes.
If you do that.
Yeah, because if I'm going to try and pick who my replacement would be, well, that's my replacement. You know, I haven't. There's all these other people. We've got, you know, 40,000 members, and there's certainly more people that would be qualified for position than what I know. I mean, I know a lot of people, but there's 40,000 members, and so yeah. But no, we don't necessarily have this. The only thing on the president-elect discussion is that people do have the ability to break a term if need be.
And Brittany or Erica, did I miss any of the important ones on the question board?
No shake from Erica.
No. Okay. All right. Let's see.
So I know I've gotten the question a couple times, and maybe you've answered it on the chat as far as where the recording will be posted. Karen Hoarding, do you know that?
Yep, we will post it to all together, Stacy. Just a couple days, because we'll want to do a little blog post about what this was, and then we'll put the links to the recordings there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So On the slide there is the nominating committee chair email, which goes to me and Heather. You will also find that email on our committee webpage, and you can see the link to that. We have really just launched the webpage a couple, right at the end of the last fiscal year. And on there, we've got FAQs and we've got links to documents. So we think that it's a good resource for people. And yeah, but my email's on there. If you got something that you didn't get answered or whatever, you know, we are open to feedback. It's a good place to do it. I'm good. You can send us an email.
Stacy, will you all be putting this deck on your nomcom page?
That is a good idea. We will do that.
Yep. And I had one other comment, like, can you bring up about being supportive to people who aren't slated?
As far as, Heather, can you tell us that mean as far as the nominating committee being supportive to them, or like the greater community?
I'm not I guess it's the nominating committee.
Okay, so people aren't slated. How do we support them? I'm not even sure how to answer that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, as if someone isn't slated, yes. It's the, yeah, that one, I think that goes back to, yeah, so how do we keep them interested in SWE?
Okay. So part of it goes back to making sure that this is a rewarding experience, and making sure that we see them again, working, you know, we do work with the other SWE leaders. And so if there's somebody good that didn't get slated or, you know, somebody that had great qualifications and didn't get slated, we will reach out to some of the other people. Like I know that we had discussions with some of the presidents and president-elects about, we don't want to lose these people. And, you know, we have had successes in some of those cases because we've had people that didn't get slated for president-elect and, you know, went ahead and did some self-reflection, some development, came back, applied again, in some cases more than once. So it's not like as if we're losing everybody, but the one thing that we will do is make sure that we try to reach out to the other SWE leaders to let them know that these people, we want to make sure that they don't get lost.
And I got the question, oops, I answered to the wrong person. The question was, are board members only US citizens?
No, absolutely not. There's no citizen requirements on any of our positions. Please, 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 we need you.
Yes.
We need you.
Yeah, and we have had a director before that was international. So.
All right.
Yep.
So if there's nothing else,
yeah.
There's our slide. Thank you so much. Once again, we value, you know, constructive feedback, and please apply, look for that call, you know, nominate, do your own self-nomination or ping somebody who you think would be good in any of those positions, and we will look forward to vetting them.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.